Hello and welcome to the Stories of Innovation, a podcast by World Vision International Nepal, and I'm your host Utsav Karel. In this episode, we'll explore around the theme of unbottling the bottlenecks of plastic waste management. In this episode, we have got Aayushi KC, who is the CEO of Khaalisisi. Talking about Khaalisisi, it has created a new business model and has disrupted the waste management industry. So today we'll be exploring quite a lot around some of the promising innovation that happened in this space. Okay, Aayushi, welcome to Stories of Innovation.
Thank you, Utsav.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Lovely to have you in our podcast. And in this episode, we are talking about unbottling the waste management, right? Because you have got this lovely company called Khaalisisi doing a lot of recycling stuff. So we are really keen to know more about, the story behind Khaalisisi, because from our research, what we see is waste management, yes, it's a massive problem, but it's also informal market, mostly run by cartel, let's put it that way. But at the same time, a girl comes in the market, disrupts the market, and now everybody is talking about her. Okay, tell us your stories.
I think that's a very kind introduction. But for me, so to put a little context to what you've just shared, Khaalisisi, we're a tech-enabled data center company. It's a social enterprise. We work on integrating the informal sector into a more formal system of waste management in Nepal to solve the growing issue of waste mismanagement. So to put some context, around 80% of the job is informal, especially in our part of the world, in the global south.
Absolutely.
And to be more specific to the waste industry, 40% of the recycling is done by the informal sector.
Right. And
the valorization of the waste, the materials, is done by the informal sector. It's driven by the informal sector. But when we talk about informal sector specific to the waste industry, we are limited to talking about just the rag pickers that we see. And we usually, they're infamously also known as robbers or thugs, who steal stuff from you and then sell it later for a profit. But it's actually a very interesting industry. It's a very robust, decentralized, an entire value chain of waste entrepreneurs. We call them entrepreneurs. Right. So it starts with the level one collectors. We call them our Khaalisisi friends, who we locally, informally are known as kabadiwalas. So what they basically do is they do doorstep collection of recyclables, and then it is passed on to a larger aggregator, the kabards, essentially, the collection centers. From then, there is a more specific collection or a supply of waste materials to a larger aggregator. And that's how the value chain flows. And then it ultimately reaches the recycler, the formal or informal recycler. That's how the entire ecosystem works. But what's beautiful about this informal ecosystem, that it's organically built. It's been operating for the past 50 years now.
Right.
And, to hold an industry for 50 years, having at least 50,000, employing at least 50,000 individuals. I'm just talking about Kathmandu right now, is I think a huge task which you cannot create with no matter what big resource, monetary resource you have. So I think there's a lot to learn from this informal sector, not just for Nepal, but even for the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Since you were talking about informal actors who are really responsible for trying to sort out the waste, what we create, right? And we know, from the social lens as well, these actors are not taken well in terms of, the recognition. At the same time, as you mentioned, there are so many derogatory terms there that has been using, lots of racial slur and what you mentioned earlier as well. And you try to, give them a recognition, right? You try to make sure that they feel valued from your Khaalisisi. So what was that aha moment that really drive you to start this company so that people can live dignified life, at the same time the issue of waste management can be also addressed?
So for me, it was more of a personal experience. So when I started Khaalisisi, I started with a very clear with this clarity that I'm going to get into the waste sector
Right.
and I'm going to solve it.
Okay.
Right? It was like,
Why West, basically?
Why
Why
West?
not maybe, like some cool tech companies, but you chose West, right? And that's very unconventional.
no, but I get this narrative a lot.
Right.
People almost like put waste and other companies in a mutually exclusive sort of angle, and they
Right.
say, why waste when you could have done so much more? I say, why not waste? I think it's much cooler.
Okay.
But when I started, so one of my first Khaalisisi friends, our first waste entrepreneur, Ram Sagar, I remember the day I met him, and he was just walking by our house, and then I just only drafted the idea of Khaalisisi. It was just on paper. So I thought I'll just have a chat with him. And I invited him over and we talked, and then I shared my big vision for waste management and how we can really transform Nepal and come out as a leader in waste management. And I shared the big vision, and to which he immediately laughed it off. He laughed at my face. He ridiculed me to the point of saying that, oh, you're just a girl. And then, today when people shoo us away from their homes,
Right.
why would people invite us over? And plus you don't have an office and stuff. So there's so many things that could stop me from starting Khaalisisi right then. But then I gathered some courage and I told him, let's just start. Let's see how it goes. There's nothing to lose. Let's just, do a pilot, essentially. So we worked for a month, and at the end of the month, he came by at my house and he told me, Didi, ispali this time I've earned 8,000 rupees more.
Wow.
And 8,000 rupees is...
It's massive.
Yeah, exactly. Especially for that
Exactly.
sector, right? So, and that was assurance and validation enough for me to start Khaalisisi as a business. And gave me the confidence to go about it, because like you rightly said, there's this massive stigma associated with the waste sector, especially with the people in the waste sector.
Right.
So to get into this industry was more of a mental challenge than anything else for
Absolutely.
me. So that validation was enough for me to get into it and start it as a business. And soon after, we were joined by other of his colleagues who came in and said, oh, even we want to join in, and we want to help you, and we want to partner. So that's how it slowly grew.
So basically that was your proof of concept, right? Like
Right.
that they working with you and, now you are creating that additional value of 8,000 rupees. And when you talk about those actors who are really, really vulnerable, right? And even 1,000 rupees counts, like most of them, like from our research was like they are migrating from different places and coming to Kathmandu for opportunities. And getting that money was, I think, really powerful moment. How was his expression when he was saying like, thanks so much for you got 8,000?
Because our Khaalisisi friends, they're not very expressive when it comes to showing emotions. But like I said, I think it went beyond emotions in the sense that, like how you asked me, you being a girl, you entered this industry.
Right.
So in my head, I thought, how would I ever, even command respect from a very male-dominated, not even very, it's completely male-dominated. And these Khaalisisi friends, these waste entrepreneurs come from a more patriarchal, background and a mindset. But then when he told me that I was able to earn 8,000 rupees more, now I'm going to buy all my 7 kids a gift when I go home. So then I thought, it's not me as an individual, whether I be a girl or a boy, that needs to do anything. It's the platform, the business that needs to gender value for these guys. So that's how I got into it. And for me, when he told me that the platform works, that was, I think, the biggest green signal for me.
Right. And that's how Khaalisisi came into existence. And now we know like how popular it is, especially in Nepal, right? Especially in Kathmandu, like there are a lot of coverage around Khaalisisi and everything happening. So you mentioned one is really, like it's a patriarchal society. We need to accept that, and we need to really change that for sure. at the same time, you're working in a patriarchal society, especially where, like all the major actors are male, and at the same time, a lot of cartelling is happening, and it's entirely informal sector. So what were the major challenges you had to get through? Like it might be like knocking on the rock or something at first, right?
So I didn't really have, a business model to look up to when I got into this industry, because what we were trying to do was something that hadn't been done, especially with this industry and with this ecosystem of informal workers. So I had to kind of, carve my own way and do a lot of trial and errors. As you rightly put, yes, there's a lot of cartelling and syndicates within this industry. So for us, being a startup, our idea has never been to replace any sort of existing system.
Right.
For us, people think that, so Khaalisisi is the company that's, coming and picking up the waste or doing recycling and stuff. For us, it's all about collaboration and it's all about partnership. So for us, it's always been about working with our Khaalisisi friends, working with the waste collectors, the waste entrepreneurs, and even maybe the mafias and syndicates, because we feel like at least they've created a certain system, and if there's some way we can tweak it and make it more, make it a win-win situation for all, why not, right? But sharing an experience in the initial days, yes, there were a little physical tip-offs with certain syndicates in certain areas, but I think that comes with any industry, right? So it's not just specific to waste industry. So that wasn't such a deterring factor for us. But other than that, I think, I was okay with the business model and how we were working with the Khaalisisi friends, to the point that it's even today, it's easier for me to deal with our waste entrepreneurs who are not formally educated and come from a patriarchal background and whatnot, than to work with formally educated institutions and individuals, because they really understand the value of what we're trying to do. So overcoming that barrier of, making people and institutions in general understand why is it important to work on waste more than ever now, and how we can collaborate together. I think those mental barriers were more powerful than working with the informal sector.
I absolutely, love the point that, it's better not to shake up the whole status quo, but try to create a value and, work together and try to carve out the difference. I think that's really amazing. At the same time, you talked about some of the challenges, but I'm sure there are certain enablers as well, right? Did you happen to find any enablers that really helped you to push hard and go further?
I think, like you rightly put, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So that's how that's the approach for us. For when it came to enablers, yes, there were certain individuals especially, and institutions that really took up to the idea. And institutions more so because it was also under their policy and mandate to work in the sector. But beyond that, there were individuals who really supported the idea. And so at the end of the day, I think from my experience, everyone wants to do good, right? Intrinsically, internally, they have that value that they want to do something good, but they just don't know how to go about it or who to work with and stuff. So I think for a lot of those kind of people, we became sort of that medium. And people really took up, took keen interest in that, on working with us. And I'm very thankful, and I think we lucked out with partnering with such individuals and institutions early on, because I think they really resonated with our idea of trying to work on a social problem and with the local ecosystem. So there were few. I remember our first client was this restaurant, which is not in existence today, but I think the individual, he really still supports us, and he's become a champion for us. So a lot of people who talk about Khaalisisi, they talk from their experience of working with us. So they, put the word out, and that shows that we're in good faith amongst their network. But most importantly, even our Khaalisisi friends, the waste entrepreneurs, because we thought it'd be really difficult to penetrate into that network, that very tight-knit, close community of individuals.
Right.
But then when they started talking about us and, really advertising on our behalf, and then people, waste entrepreneurs coming up to us, I think that was validation that we are in good faith amongst their community and they can trust us. So I think for us, the biggest champions were the Khaalisisi friends themselves.
I think that's amazing. Since we have been talking about the story behind Khaalisisi and how it has been really empowering for, like Khaalisisi West entrepreneurs, basically. For our listener, I think like they're keen to understand what actually Khaalisisi is. So if you could share, like what Khaalisisi is, then that would be great.
So the literal translation of Khaalisisi in English would be Khali is empty and Sisi is bottles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why we went with the name Khaalisisi is because I think you would understand that it goes Khaalisisi Purano Kagaz Phalam.
Right.
It's almost like a call out that we're so used to hearing in Nepal. But what it essentially means is, so there's this, for some context, so there's this group of waste entrepreneurs who use their bicycles every single day. They start their work every single day at 6 a.m. They go alley to alley screaming their lungs out saying, Khaalisisi Purano Kagaz Botal Phalam, which essentially means empty bottles, metal, paper, copy, books. He's actually calling out people to buy those books. Right. So the ecosystem pays you for your waste. So I think it's an incredible, it's an exciting system where the take-back system doesn't even require the use of diesel and fuel,
right.
Diesel and petrol, right? So that's the ecosystem that Nepali people especially have been familiar with for the past 50 years now.
Right.
And that is what we wanted to take digital, and that's how it came to the form of Khaalisisi.com.
Right. So that .com allows me to say, hey, I've got this thing, and then like, would you like to buy? And then somebody comes and pick up and like gives me a reward as well.
Right.
Okay. That's more about digitizing at the same time, making it more cool. All right. So I've got a question for you, right? Although I've been asking so much questions. And one is around like, what are some of the key factors that create this waste management really challenging? I'm sure like when we were looking into reports, then one was lack of source segregation, right? So since you have been championing in this industry, like what do you think are some of the major reason behind, like we are not able to deal with this major issue of waste management, especially in a country like Nepal?
So waste is relatively a new concept.
Right.
We didn't really have waste maybe 30 or 40 years before. But now with this dizzying speed at which consumerism is rising, and how, distant people have become about understanding how their consumerism really impacts the environment, I think that is how it all starts to create the problem of waste itself. But I think couple of issues I'd like to start with. First would be, so there are projects and campaigns that have been happening for so many years now, but they're mostly curtailed around waste cleanups or mountain cleanups or things like that. And although it's well intentioned, so kudos on the intention behind it, but it's essentially not waste management. It's waste transfer.
Right.
You're cleaning a certain area, you're picking the waste, and you're essentially putting it somewhere else.
Right.
That's not a sustainable solution at all. And the way, from the private sector angle, so there's a lot of competition between private companies to get into the waste sector.
Right.
But the competition is only limited to the transport of waste. So essentially we pay about starting at 150 or 200 rupees for our waste to be collected every single day, right? And so that is where the competition between private sector is, to get into that space. And that, again, essentially is just waste transfer. That's not waste management, right? And the other thing is what you mentioned about source segregation. So, before there wouldn't be much of waste. So if there'd be organic waste, people would just use it in their land. But now people don't have that kind of luxury of affording a land even where they can dump their organic waste as well. And also, I think it's easier to not separate waste at source and just bundle it all together, because you're paying a certain price for the waste to be collected. So why bother, to separate your waste and go through the entire process? And I mean, so there's no incentive for people, because it's like this. So if you tell a teenager who's in their like 12 or 13 or even 19-year-old to think about saving for the retirement,
right,
I think that's a very distant problem or a solution, right? So it's the same with waste. So if you tell people, if you separate your waste at source, then the environment will be clean, then you'll see birds again in the city, and there'll be no air pollution, no strikes and stuff like that. I mean, that's a distant solution. So people don't really immediately attach themselves with that solution. So I think that's a problem. And also it's easier for people to just mix everything together. And even for people who do separate waste at source, the trucks that come in, they just dump it all together. So there's no point of going through that hassle, right? And so I think these are the issues, but mostly it's driven by supply chain inefficiency. I think the entire problem is with how inefficient the supply chain has been, and how the private sector has been involved, and how their involvement is creating more waste, more waste transfer. Now it's Sisidol, tomorrow it's Banchere Dada, thereafter tomorrow there'll be some other Dada. Yeah. So this way we'll only be creating more landfills. And to be honest, in Nepal, it's not even a landfill. It's not a proper landfill. True. It's a dumping site. Right. So, and even today, I think a lot of focus. So there's a lot of talk about waste management, especially after the mayor took it upon himself to make it an agenda, right? And but even today, the focus is on the end part of the supply chain, which is the dumping part.
Right.
I think the focus is still on how we can negotiate with the landfill, the people, community there, how we can dump more waste, how we can get the permission to dump more waste. I think that's a very wrong approach. That's a very short-term approach, very short-term. But so it needs to start with the whole value chain, starting with source separation, even before that with advocacy, with education. So a number of problems. And to add on to that, I think the other problem is also around not using relevant data. Right. So we might have data around, so this much of waste is being collected every day from Kathmandu, like 9 lakh kilos or 900 tons is being collected every day, equivalent to 12 elephants, I think. So that's the waste. But we don't really use it in a context where it actually makes sense to make policies. For example, when it came to policies, for the past many years, the government has tried to come up with a policy of banning plastic waste below a certain micron level, right? But it never became effective. The same with waste burning and stuff. Now, can you imagine, the plastic industry in Nepal is a 40 billion industry. Right. So it's like going against the Goliaths, coming up with a policy that just doesn't make something, and especially for Nepal, where economic stability is more important today. So you're going against an industry, you're coming up with random policies, so I think using data is also very relevant, and people really don't use data, especially in the waste sector. So these problems altogether, I think.
Right. I think this was really enlightening for me, because when we are thinking about waste management, then we think about management, right? So you rightly said it's about the waste transfer that is taking place more from one place to another place. And regarding the source segregation as well, like from my experience, right? For some reason I was trained because of some of the laws in the country where I was living to, segregate, right? Else I would have been fined. So then I started to do that in Nepal as well, right? So I've got recycling, food waste and everything. So then, as you rightly said, that when someone comes to collect the waste, they just mix it up, right? So there's no point. So source segregation is something we need to start, but at the same time, as you said, it's really, really tricky as well, because I can't see the quick benefit, right? I can't portray something like, it's going to be really beautiful because I segregate waste. That doesn't make sense to me. As you say, okay, if you ask someone, you need to do retirement thing, planning from the age of 16, that doesn't work. So that is something where I just wanted to add upon about the culture of recycling and reusing. Let's start with reusing. How do you see, is there any trend now of young people or, at least some sections in the community who are really into reusing, like I could see, like some promising startup coming with, like upcycling and those kind of things. So, since you are more into this bit, so can you share some examples or anything?
I don't think it's a trend now, because I think we're almost the trend setters here.
Right.
From coming from Global South, especially with how our mothers used to, reuse every Horlicks dabbas and stuff to store stuff when it comes to upcycling or reusing especially.
Yeah.
So throughout my childhood, I've worn clothes handed down to me by my elder siblings. But that, I think, needs to have a fresh narrative, because our lifestyle in itself is changing today.
Right.
And how our parents grew is extremely different from how we're growing up right now, especially with the immersive use of technology. Right. So I think that's an opportunity in itself, but we really need to find out how that can be used to, encourage more people to reuse or even upcycle more. Because like I said, it's easier to be more wasteful. If people have money, so they'd rather pay you for a service and not do things on their own. But then that can be an opportunity for itself. So like you said, there's so many companies now upcycling products. So I think entrepreneurship is key here.
Right.
There's so many startups that are working on that. So how can an enterprising approach be taken to solve this or bring back the trend of reusing and upcycling? I think will help at a more commercial and a larger scale, instead of an individual scale where I'm just saving some of the Horlicks bottles alone versus entire population doing that.
I really like that narrative, because we all are connected with, like reusing some of the products. Like everyone has got that, like Horlicks bottle where you have got your pickles, you have got your sugar and everything. So yes, reusing has been there since quite a while. And, yes, they are like upcycling coming in, and actually, like I saw, like in New York, like they have got this rent the runway kind of thing, right? So you can actually rent your outfit, and I could see, like one young company doing in Nepal as well. So at least that thing is coming, and as you rightly said, it's not like something which is really alien concept. That's what we have been doing for generations, right? Like even I used to get like old shirt from my brother, right? So that's how we have been doing things. But I think emphasizing on that value we already had and trying to talk more around sustainability, and as you said, about advocating around it, would be really helping in order to minimize the creation or generation of waste, right?
Right, definitely.
And now, since we have been talking quite a lot around reusing, what about recycling? Have you seen any trend in terms of recycling? Because some of the research shows that it's really expensive to recycle, especially plastic waste, right? It's way much better for private businesses to actually get the new plastics rather than recycling it. So any experience you want to share around those?
So when it comes to the topic of waste management, I think people, the first point that they pick up on is recycling,
Right.
which again lies at the end of the value chain. Recycling is the least desirable activity.
Absolutely.
Right. So, but the focus goes on in there because it's a more tangible sort of a part of the chain. And I think, that is the case because especially in Nepal and the Global South, we're so used to looking up to innovations. Let's say that's happening in the Western part of the world, more developed part of the world. And it's more of a borrowed concept whenever we try to bring innovations again. So it's not an organic, internalized sort of a innovation idea, but it's mostly a borrowed concept. But I think that is where we go wrong, because we have the problems that we have, the challenges that we have come out of our own unique socio-cultural, political, geopolitical landscape, right? Versus what's happening in the Western world, where there's a complete socio-economic structure, all in all. So I think we really need to move away from the concept of adopting what's happening, the innovations that are happening in the more developed or Western part of the world, and really look out to innovations that are already existent in Nepal and in the neighboring region, and harness that because that innovation all in all. So, and And that was the same with Khaalisisi. So when we came up with the idea of Khaalisisi, it was not to replace the 50-year-old ecosystem of our informal waste workers, but it was to collaborate with them. How can we digitally empower them? How can we make it a more socially inclusive platform for these innovators? Right? And when it comes to recycling, I think it's again a borrowed concept.
Exactly.
And also, like you said, it's extremely capital intensive. And for a country like Nepal, it just does not justify in terms of volume as well, because it's a business at the end of the day. You have to justify volumes and you have to justify your P&L books, right? So more than focusing on the recycling part of it, I think for a country like Nepal, we really need to start from the cliched advocacy level, right? Whether in terms of intervention in education system and the advocacy, then looking after the collection system, creating value of materials, valorization of waste, and then eliminating the intermediaries that are not adding any value into the system. I think that is more of a holistic macro level approach that we need to take. And when it comes to Nepal, I think, we get this asked a lot, that one of our most popular questions or concerns that come up to us is that, yes, we do separate waste, but your Khaalisisi friends only, they cherry pick and take only a certain items.
Right.
And that's when I talk about the ecosystem again, because what we buy, what our Khaalisisi friends buy, depends on what they can again later sell into the value chain.
Exactly.
But in Nepal, again, recycling is only now limited to PET bottles or plastic bottles, the plastic waste, right? So there's no interest beyond plastic. I think because it's a much researched product, and also because there's proven innovations around the world that you can just copy paste. But I think we need to go beyond plastic, because plastic is just one of the small components of the thousands of other materials that can create value and contribute to the GDP of the country. So going beyond recycling of plastics, I think, is important. And setting up commercial factories. For example, glass is something that's 100% recyclable infinite number of times. But because we do not have commercial glass recycling facility in Nepal, the material just does not move and ends up in Sisidol and Banchere Dada, the landfills, right? So it's not about us being a company or our intervention alone. It's about how ecosystems really collaborate and communicate with one another, the stakeholders within the ecosystem. So whenever people ask me about competition and stuff, so I say companies never compete. It's ecosystem does. So as long as our ecosystem is not, fully connected in that sense, no matter whatever innovation you bring, it's only going to be limited. It won't achieve its full potential.
Absolutely, because I was trying to reflect when you were talking about, innovation. Like sometimes we tend to borrow concept from other contexts and we try to contextualize it, and it doesn't work. For us, when we talk about innovation, we think that, the local problem must have local solution. And one of the things that really strike me is, guita, those cow dung made kind of a bread-like thing that they use especially in the southern part of Nepal, right? That is a kind of innovation for me, because we might say, it's just, some rubbish cow dung thing, which is just pasting on the wall of these villages. But, they know, since generations and generations, the flood is coming, right? And at that time, all the firewood and those things are not going to work. So that's why they had kept those really cool stuff. So for me, these are the powerful innovation. And sometimes we tend to tell these communities, no, this is not good for you. And we are trying to break their traditional practices by imposing something. And when you're talking about recycling as well, yes, we need to more work around the value chain itself and how we can make that value chain better. And one of the example I still think is, I think we briefly discussed before this recording as well, the concept of polyfloss. So the whole idea was, yes, as you rightly said, everyone talks about plastic when they talk about waste management, right? Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be talking more beyond plastic in this session because there are a lot of research around it. We have the statistics around how much plastics get dumped, what happens. Even now we are talking about microplastic getting into human body, right? So it's always been a talk of the town. So we're looking into, after we did a research, how we can really manage plastics waste. So we looked into different products. You can, heat it up and create like some of the latrine pit that can be used in the community. But then, there are already existing latrine system. Why you want to reinvent the wheel? And then we looked into a different way that we realized, in different countries, they can make a cotton candy kind of thing out of the PET plastic bottle, right? Using a shredder machine. And then that can be used as an insulation. So what we thought about was, okay, this is a great product, but how we can link with the value chain. So we thought about, what about we ask children to, okay, if you collect a plastic bottle from your community and bring it to the school, we'll give you stationaries, right? So now they will also understand, okay, these can be recycled, these can be reused. So starting to empower children from the early years. And once that come into the collection point in the school, that will be transported, to the local processing facility where it is changed into polyfloss, right? Again, then there are the women who are working are being trained at the same time. They learn a new skill, and those products are going back to the community. And then, the children are getting insulated classrooms, the health facilities are getting insulated. So again, we are even, thinking beyond the social norms of how we can recycle, and maybe reusing is something we really need to focus on. And at the same time, you get this really beautiful example of how we used to manage waste 20 years back or 30 years back, right? When I was a kid, I remember, in my neighborhood, when there was a food waste that used to go to the kettles, right? And when there was other kind of waste, they used to make some handicraft out of it. So now it's more about, we have got fast moving life, and you said we have got this immersive life, right? And I really like that term. So a lot to do, but at the same time, finding a local solution from the local innovator like yourself, because you understand the problem, or the local innovators understand the problem more than any one of us. So trying to create the value is really important. Now, since we have been talking quite a lot around waste, but we are more limited to plastic waste, let's try to talk more around e-waste, or, you talked about the glasses and the bottles as well. What are the new trends you see? What people are dumping, and how it is going on right now?
So, like I said, there's waste that goes beyond plastic, and even in the plastic sector, there's different kinds of plastic, like hundreds and thousands of different kinds of plastic waste in itself. But the trend right now, one example that I can share is, growing up, we could have never imagined throwing out our TV, the Dabba TV, the monitor, the big monitor, right? It was such a asset, almost like a prized possession, equivalent to gold maybe. But now we're getting a lot of such materials, I wouldn't even call it waste, like those monitors and the CPUs and the keyboards. So there's this whole new set of waste or material that's refuse that's coming out of homes and offices, which the ecosystem had never had to deal with before. So now there's this whole conversation around how e-waste can be managed. So e-waste in itself has become I think in Nepal alone, it's almost a 200 million industry. Wow. So I think it's a growing market. So there's a lot of, so it's a huge problem, but then again, with problem comes solution, right? So the opportunity to tackle the problems. I think Nepal, the waste market in Nepal is blue ocean when it comes to creating solutions around waste. So there's e-waste is a new trend when it comes to waste, and then there's the other is also around cloth waste, right? The cloth material. So there's a lot of because I mean we live in a world where fast fashion is the norm. Absolutely. People are changing their attire like they don't. A lot of people don't even wish to repeat their attire. So and I think this is also where I want to talk a little about when we talk about developed and developing. So Nepal is usually the developing or the least developed, and the West is the more developed countries. So I think we also need to look at that from the perspective of with data. Right. I mean, the way that supposedly developed world is, creating this consumerism and fast fashion, how they're externalizing that cost to the global south in terms of production and stuff, it's just not sustainable.
Right.
So how do we define that term? The developed and developing is, I think, also there needs to be a new, fresher take on that as well. So I think there's a lot that the West can learn from Nepal and the global south when it comes to things like even waste handling.
Right. So as you mentioned, it's e-West, which is emerging market. So yes, there's a problem, but as an entrepreneur, you see more solution as well as, you know, a unique opportunity to pursue that aspects as well. And the second one you talked about is fast fashion, right? Yeah. Nowadays, like it's more about social media, people posting with, you know, like new wardrobe. And after that, oh, okay, my friends have already seen that now. The other thing, have you seen like more reusing? Yes, we have been doing for generations, like wearing clothes of our siblings, but I could read, you know, like somewhere about this cloth donation or the cloth bank and those kind of things. Do you get those clothes as well, or are you working around it, or do you have any peers who have been working on, you know, like recycling or upcycling, the cloth waste, which are dumped here because of the consumerism?
So I'll tell you what, being specific to the cloth waste that we're talking about, you know, people think that, you know, maybe I can donate my clothes to an orphanage, old age home and stuff. But people don't take in clothes as donation anymore. No. People refuse to take clothes. Institutions refuse to take clothes. So people are like, so what can be done with the cloth waste, right? So yes, there are projects and campaigns around reuse and recycling and upcycling of cloth waste. But this is what I mean, right? So there's a lot of interventions happening, but I mean, to be very honest, it won't make an impact if it's not scalable and if it's not done at a commercial scale. Right, so like you rightly said, there might be local innovations of putting the cow dung pasting it on your walls and whatnot, but that's slowly disappearing. But it's because it's not taking that commercial space or it's not scaling up. So even the same with any kind of waste, doesn't even have to be cloth waste. So there's a lot of local interventions in tackling waste, but again, because of lack of funding or, you know, so many other issues, these enterprises die very young.
Right.
And they don't see the impact that they could have potentially created. So when I talk about waste, I avoid talking about the specific waste in itself, because waste industry is not about the waste alone. It's about the approach, the perspective you take into the industry. And I think this industry is where entrepreneurship is really lacking. And if we could support even small entrepreneurs who are working to, you know, bring in something like Rent the Runway in Nepal and stuff, and support that kind of ecosystem, then I think there'll be an actual bend in this ecosystem. Or else it'll just be like few good examples that sound nice, you know, but then they just die the next day.
Exactly. You know, like when you're talking about upcycling or, you know, like recycling, which is still challenging, as you rightly mentioned, one of the thing is there's a stigma around it, or, you know, like negative perception around, you know, like using the product which are recycled, because either people think it's a recycled, so this is, I want something very fresh. The second one is people think it's a low quality as well as, you know, like it's a low cost product. So when we're having like discussion with different stakeholders, the first thing they said is don't position itself as low cost solution, right? Make it premium. So that's why like there are so many things. For example, when you're talking about you know, like sharing clothes or like Rent the Runway kind of concept in Nepal, again, the perception is like somebody has already worn this cloth, right? So will we be able to be assured that it will be like super dry cleaned, everything will be hygienic or not? So again, you know, like as you rightly mentioned in one of your previous point, that sometimes it's really important to understand the local context. We can't just, you know, like borrow idea from somewhere and start to do that. So yeah, a lot of challenges. So, but at the same time, there are some of the really exciting avenues coming up as well. So where do you see the waste management industry in next 5 to 10 years from the positive lens?
From the positive lens, I think, so first of all, I think just the discourse that's happening around it, that people are taking interest in it, and it's become talk of the town, especially with the mayor taking it up as a almost like a personal mandate to solve this issue, I think.
Right.
So at least people are starting to talk, or else it'd just be a hush-hush topic that you'd brush under the carpet. The bureaucracy would just brush under the carpet, and this would come up as a problem only during 2 times of the year, that is monsoon and Dasai, the biggest festival of Nepal. So that was the only time when waste usually would be an issue. But now I think people are taking up at a personal level as well, as an individual, as an household, as an institution as well. So I think that discourse was very important, and that's taking place right now. And that is how it all starts. Because if you don't talk about it, it's out of sight, it's out of mind, something like that, right? So at least people are talking about it. And now I think there'll be a lot of interest, especially from the private sector, to get into this industry. And I hopefully from a different perspective, not just the waste transfer narrative that I shared earlier. So in terms of business, I think it'll be a fantastic opportunity. And hopefully we'll see a lot of local innovations coming into this sphere, and a cleaner city, a cleaner Nepal, definitely. But my hope would be to, build Nepal as that exemplary place where waste management innovations came from, and which I think is not impossible.
Right.
The only thing that's stopping us from doing that is, I think we lack people with big vision, and I think we don't have enough risk takers in Nepal. So if we do that, I think Nepal can really shine and come off as an example in the waste sector.
Right. So there are a lot to be done, but there are so many motivating things that are happening right now as well. So we need more innovators like yourself, right? And people can learn from some of the unique solutions which are being provided by local innovators. And absolutely, Nepal can be one of the go-to reason to learn about waste management, not just about the waste transfer anymore, but about the waste management. Just to give context to our listener who might not have good context about Nepal, that recently we have elected, Kathmandu city has elected a mayor who is really, really focusing on waste management is one of his top priorities. So a lot of time we talked about mayor, so just to want to give you context, it's the cool guy who is doing quite a lot around waste management, because now people understand that the fundamental thing the local councils or the local municipality does is not creating a big roads or constructing big infrastructures, but people actually are more worried about the waste management. They are more worried about the quality of education of the kids, and they are more worried about some of the sustainable jobs and local transportation in the city. So yes, we are already excited about this one. But when you talk about the waste management, and one of the key actors are these waste entrepreneurs, as you mentioned. So how creating more waste, or even the climate change, which is also triggered by inefficient or very chaotic waste management, has impacted this community, especially the marginalized people who are in this profession, especially female. From your experience, how it is really impacting these communities who are more vulnerable.
So earlier, when these waste entrepreneurs would go out on the streets collecting waste, collecting materials, the access would be easier. But today, imagine you have apartments and flats and households up in the 8th, 9th, 10th floor of a building. You have offices with very strict security protocol. You have embassies with strict security protocol, where these guys would never have the access today, right? Despite saving at least 40% of the materials ending up in the landfill. So it's about access as well. And the other thing is about the stigma, the fierce stigma that comes with their job and their background, their ethnic background and their jobs, right? So for us, it was very important to eliminate those barriers. And now the waste entrepreneurs who work with us, for example, they work with the British Embassy, where, they'd never had the access before. And one time we celebrated Dasai with our Khaalisisi friends. And so one of them asked me, so where's the location? And we were celebrating it at Hotel Himalaya at that time, a hotel essentially, right? So And the event started, and no one would show up for the next 30 minutes. And then we started making calls, and we were asking, where are you? You know, we're waiting for you, the waste entrepreneurs. And they'd tell us, they were kind of reluctant, and they were hesitant to come inside the hotel because, you know, they were like, for all our lives, we've been shooed away from places like a hotel, you know, such premium places, and now
a star hotel. All of a sudden,
and then when
right?
they came in, and one of them said, Mukesh, I remember he told me, yeah, we've been banned from these places all our lives, and now today when we came in with our jacket and with our ID cards, you know, and they actually, you know how the guards salute you as a gesture, a welcome, they did that. So they were so honored. They felt, you know, they really felt that for the first time in their lives that their work was valued, and they as individuals were valued as well. So I think on the way through our platform, although that was not our initial, you know, that was not our tangible goal that we wanted to, achieve, but that has happened through the process with a simple identity card, right? So that really helped them create that access and has given them that confidence to. Because initially when we made the identity cards for our Khaalisisi friends, our waste entrepreneurs, we did it without a photograph. So an ID without a photograph, useless, right? But they just wouldn't allow us to photograph them because they were so, ashamed of what they were doing, and they were fearful that maybe if somebody sees me, if somebody sees my photo in my hometown or something, they'd be like ashamed. They were ashamed of being associated with this industry. But today, they're out there giving interviews, and, you know, they're so vocal about what they do, and they take so much pride in what they're doing, and they've become better individuals as well, at an individual capacity and even at their work. So I think that access has been amazing for us, and something that we also learn from every day. And when it comes to women, indirectly as well. So a lot of our Khaalisisi friends, the waste entrepreneurs, to be honest, never educated their children, the girl child especially, prior to this, because for them it was about marrying them off, and, you know, why incur the additional expense. Education won't do any good to them. But now we have a program where we support the girls' education for our waste entrepreneurs, so they understand. They really took up the value, not just for the sake of it, but they understood the value of educating the girls as well. So indirectly, I think that confidence, that access, that exposure has even trickled down to that level of them having the girls educated as well.
I think this is really amazing and really powering enterprise what you're running, because at first it was more about empowering them with the additional income, but now the positive unintended outcome was getting recognition from the society, right? And like when I was listening to you, I was so moved when I heard the story about these entrepreneurs who were rejected by the society. They were banned from certain premises. They were basically hiding their identity from their, friends and families back in their hometown, and all of a sudden getting that recognition, having that dignified life. I think that is something we really, really read basically in university about, social entrepreneurship, but having this opportunity to learn this kind of really powerful stories as a first-hand experience from yourself is really, really amazing. So I've got a final question for you, and this is around how can private sector and innovators, of course, like Khaalisisi can partner with development agency. Or let me put it the other way around, okay? So how can development agencies learn from private sector / cool innovators like Khaalisisi?
I think it's a two-way street. It's not just one party learning, right? So it's all about, from my experience, it's always been about collaboration and partnership, and everybody winning together in this. So for the development the agency, the ecosystem that you come from, I think it comes from a very well-intentioned space where you want to create a certain impact, a certain measurable impact on a certain sector in a certain region, right? when it comes to private sector, we might not fit right into the box of how you define impact, or we might not be limited to a certain region or a certain like measurable KPIs, right? So I think if we find a way where we can come together and collaborate, where both our objectives sort of meet,
Right.
and how we can utilize each other's expertise, because I think and also the other thing is, when we talk about private sector in Nepal, it's usually limited to the big industries, or that that are churning millions and millions of dollars, right? But I think what Nepal needs right now is an entrepreneurial intervention, especially when we're talking about innovation.
Right.
Because that's where, because in bigger industries and corporates, there's a lot of protocols that come in the way of creating something innovative and going out of the company's,
Right.
Mandate of doing work. So I think it would be very interesting if the local startup ecosystem even can collaborate with the bigger development agencies and come together and really solve a problem, a local problem. Because the other reason is, I think why going local is more important than ever is because these local innovators or these local founders and startups are not just driven by achieving a certain goal. I think it's more personal, and it comes out of passion, right?
Right.
Which I think cannot be replicated by any, even a development agency, whatever project you write, right? So I think if you collaborate with that kind of passion, with the strength that you have in terms of PR or networking or even capital injection, I think if those two assets meet, that then I think can create magic, especially in a place like Nepal where there's lack of funding, especially for startups. So I think there's a great opportunity for everyone here
To co-create together.
Definitely.
Right. And I really like, like startups, because there's no traditional way of thinking and always challenging the conventional wisdom. And most importantly, they are agile and they are quick to learn from the mistakes. And it's more about trial and error, right? And learning quickly. So quite a lot to learn from private sector and innovators like yourself. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed this topic, and especially all the powerful stories you shared. And as a Nepali, I would like to thank you for making the lives of some of the most vulnerable workers in the West management ecosystem more dignified, adding more income in their lives and making their lives better. Thanks so much. It is an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir. But I think I don't deserve all the credit. I mean, obviously, because me being, out there and speaking about it, I think that's how I get the credit for the work that I don't do, actually. But because, look, there are entrepreneurs, who follow their passion, who are vocal about what they do, who speak about what they do, have great networking and PR, and they are very articulate. Then there's this entrepreneurs who work day in and night, who work extremely hard to put bread on the table for their families, right? And these are the waste entrepreneurs of the world, our Khaalisisi friends. So I think if we're really serious about sustainability, circular economy, and future, all in all, I think it is high time that we start engaging such waste entrepreneurs, such local entrepreneurs in the equation, and really acknowledge their contribution at the ground level than entrepreneurs like us.
No, I think it's more about you have been advocating basically for those who have been marginalized, who have been shut down for many years, and giving them voice. And actually somebody has to take the lead, and you have been taking the lead. So once again, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.